The gold energy is very interesting to me, and I've followed this EA for over a year now. And Mr. Gregory Hay has developed some really interesting bots over the years in the marketplace because I find that he really actually knows how to trade. He uses real trading concepts. However, some of these bots also oftentimes have very aggressive recovery functions, which end up turning very interesting strategies into losing ones. And then signals tend to come and go, and they tend to go through phases of being very popular and or very unpopular. So today I want to actually dive into this bot, which I've actually taken some inspiration from like the predecessor over a year ago. And I've learned a lot from this particular EA. However, it's never quite taken off as much as it should because of some other more recovery functions and some other factors which I don't think are necessarily addressed. So I'd love to kind of talk to you guys about this bot just to kind of show you what I think makes a lot of sense, as well as some areas where I think are kind of holding it back from being as good as possible. This video is sponsored by the Prosperity Algo Prop Firm Bundle, a portfolio of 6 EAs designed to pass prop firms and get consistent payouts. Click the link in the description to get a 1-week free trial. So Gold Energy, I actually discovered this bot years ago, and it was one of the inspirations behind my gold missile system. Because I saw that here effectively his main trigger is that he's looking for a large impulse candle to enter the market. And he does this particularly on gold. And on top of that, he adds a few other really interesting filters, like looking for like a time-based filter where he only tries to trade the high impact, high volatility sessions, as well as the fact that he often uses more of a recovery function. And this style of system and this style of bot actually works. And this is one of the first times I ever saw the concept of the impulse candle. And I learned a tremendous amount from this particular bot, which I found really, really interesting. However, if you actually run a backtest on this bot, it's not profitable, and it's never really had a super long-term consistently profitable signal. Like as we can see here, he does have a very impressive long live-term signal, but I've also seen signals come and go from this bot over the years, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. But there is clearly something here. So if we actually look at the real strategy, the strategy is an impulse candle. So it's looking for a big candle to enter the market with. There's also some really interesting indicators like the ADX and the MA, where effectively it uses this as filters to know if the market is trending or if you're an uptrend or a downtrend, all of which is really interesting. At the same time, clearly this is a very spread sensitive bot because it runs on the M1. It doesn't really mean it's going to be spread sensitive, but it's very much in a low time frame and it requires an ECN or super raw spread to work properly. And effectively here, he's explaining that this is a non-martingale, non-grid system. It is prop firm compatible. Each trade has a stop loss and a take profit, and it has a very high historical win rate. All of this makes complete sense because clearly this is a scalping bot. This is an impulse candle scalping bot, so your win rate should be super high, but what I've seen historically is that the risk reward will be extremely inverted. So this type of system is great for people who like to win all the time, but I have found that it's not great for prop firms just because typically you rely on extremely high amounts of leverage and you're very broker sensitive. Because if you have even a tiny difference in terms of price feeds, you can see a pretty significant difference. Frankly, I used to trade my golden missile system, which is quite similar to this bot, on prop firms, but over time I've moved away from using that particular one on props just because it takes you absolutely forever to pass because the risk reward is so inverted. And that's why systems like our longbow systems, for instance, work super well on prop firms because they can have very high risk rewards, and you can have a 1-to-7 or a 1-to-8 risk reward occasionally, which can really make your whole month in terms of trading performance. So effectively here, we can now go and kind of flip through some of the different pictures he shared. And once again, we can see that, yes, as I've studied this bot in detail, probably more than just about any other bot in the marketplace, and it is clearly an impulse candle. One thing as well is let's note that there can be a recovery function here. So I think he does scale lot size depending on the performance of the previous trade. And he does like to do this. He's done this as well with an opening range breakout for gold as well, but a time-based one. And I find that this is actually not a great choice with this type of bot, because if you have 2 losers in a row and use a recovery function, you can very rapidly have a pretty nasty drawdown. But once again, it's something which is optional, so I'm sure that you can turn it on and turn it off per your liking. So now if we hop into MT5, if we run a back test, it is doing exactly kind of what he's saying. It is clearly an impulse candle based system, and it's using trend filters as well in order to make trading decisions. So impulse, impulse, but then stop out, impulse, impulse, impulse. And one thing to note is this was the 1 minute open high low close back test. If I run the same back test using every tick based on real ticks, we can see that it's going to go straight down. And that's really not a great sign. So I'm curious as to what he's doing here. Like in my experience with this type of scalping bot, if you make the scalping, like the start trail, effectively, like when the trailing stop loss kicks in, too small. So you say like, hey, start trailing after 0.01% in profit, you're almost always going to have an equity curve that looks like this, where it only goes up if you don't have spreads. If you make your take profit too tight, then quite often it will go down. And the reason why some developers like to do this is because in the first few, for a week or two, you might very well have a period like this where the equity curve is technically going up. And because of that, certain customers will be quite happy with that because they'll be like, oh my God, this is an amazing system. But in reality, like over the long term, if you don't take into account spreads, if you don't factor in spreads properly, you will ultimately have this downward sloping equity curve. And here as well, too, we can see the stop loss is significantly larger than the take profit, but that would kind of be expected with this style of system. If we quickly go in here too, we can see that the average profit trade is significantly less than the average loss trade, also to be expected with this style of scalping system. So ultimately, like my conclusion about this bot is there's really a real strategy here, except for whatever reason, the stop loss and take profits which are being used are too tight, and it's causing everything to be destroyed by spreads. So I don't know why he's done this. Like I've seen in the past, this bot's performance used to be better. So I'm curious as to what his logic is here, if he's trying to make it compatible for a certain type of broker or why he's doing this. So there's a lot of like uncertainty around this bot because clearly this guy knows what he's doing. He understands trading, and this is not a scam. Like it's very, very much a real bot, but for whatever reason, with the current settings, it's losing money. So if you're interested in this bot, I might reach out to him and kind of ask what's going on or ask for any maybe like alternative set files to make it better because there is a real system here. It's actually a pretty interesting system. But at the same time, it is currently not very profitable if you run a backtest with the default settings. My experience, this type of bot, it works if you like super high win rate systems, but the trade-off there is your risk reward will be very inverted. And if you're more of a prop trader, probably not the best option for you. But definitely a real bot. I have a lot of respect for Gregory. I think he's a very intelligent developer and comes up with good systems. It's just sometimes you need to kind of tweak it a little bit in order to make it ideal for the current market conditions and for real world market conditions more generally. So guys, hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one. Have yourselves a great day.